In the eyes of many, the first 15 minutes can make or break a horror film. As a result, many horror filmmakers choose to kick off proceedings with a bang, dishing out swift, sharp shocks to ensure that audiences are firmly bolted to their seats for the remainder of the film's runtime. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 brutal horror movie openings nobody saw coming. Number 10. A Killer Party Ghost Ship. Okay, so you might not have seen this opening coming in the context of the movie, but you all probably knew this entry was going to be here, but it's just so shocking and iconic that there was no way that we couldn't include it. First impressions of Ghost Ship's opening would lead you to believe that you're watching an old Hollywood-style film, complete with lavish costumes, sets, and music. Everything seems completely serene and wholesome, as an elderly man takes a young girl by the hand and they begin dancing to the band performing on stage. Said loveliness is soon thrown overboard, however, when out of nowhere a steel wire comes loose from its spool and whips itself across the dance floor, slicing up every guest in attendance. Well, all aside from a little girl, who is simply just too short to be in the wire's death radius. All she can do is watch as those around her bleed to death while trying to recover their missing body parts. It's without question the reason why most people even remember this film, as it's such a hard left turn to take, given how serene and calm the first couple of minutes are. It's just a shame that the rest of the movie doesn't quite manage to live up to that iconic opening. Number 9. That Ain't No Alligator, Hatchet. For those that love the slasher films of the 80s, the Hatchet series should be essential viewing. Not only are they dripping with scuzzy charm, but they're also full of cameos from recognizable horror icons and buckets of gore that accompany every murder scene. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that the film's first opening features both of those key selling points in spades. Here, Ainsley and Samson, a father and son duo played by Blair Witch Project's Joshua Leonard and the ever-lovable Robert Englund, are scouring the swamps one evening in search of a giant alligator. The two bicker with one another before Ainsley goes off to take a leak in the woods. Here, his father eerily stops replying, and upon returning to their boat, Ainsley is blindsided and viciously ripped apart by a killer. While we of course expect slasher movie death scenes to be pretty grim ordeals, this one goes overboard by showing Ainsley's limbs being torn off before his attacker eventually splits him in half and rips the bottom half of his body off in full graphic fashion. Even the most hardened gorehounds will likely be impressed by this one. Number 8. A Not-So-FUNFAIR, It Chapter 2. Now, for anyone that's managed to read the colossal tome that is Stephen King's It, this scene wouldn't be all that surprising. But if you just so happen to be one of those moviegoers that's never had the time to thumb through such an imposing novel, then you likely were shocked and appalled by this sequel's opening. This intro sees partners Adrian and Dawn attempting to enjoy a lovely evening at the TERRI Fun Fair, only for them to be viciously assaulted by a group of homophobic thugs. After beating up Adrian, the thugs throw him over the side of the bridge and into the river below, where he's pulled to safety by Pennywise. However, before he can even make sense of what's going on, Pennywise begins devouring him as Don watches in horror. Overall, it's an incredibly tough scene to watch for multiple reasons, due to the context of the violence as well as just the explicit nature of the violence itself. But it really says something when the appearance of a demonic clown that bites someone's heart through their armpit is just a distraction from the very real ugliness of the whole scenario. Number 7. Jason's Revenge, Friday the 13th Part 2. After the box office success of the first film, the producers at Paramount rushed Friday the 13th Part 2 into production. However, their original plans had to be changed when Adrienne King, who played the previous film's survivor Alice, asked for a reduced role after an obsessive fan began stalking her, which the majority of moviegoers likely weren't aware of. At the start of this film, then, we see Alice trying her best to lead a normal life, following the highly traumatic events that occurred at Camp Crystal Lake. She's moved away to start afresh, but night after night, she's plagued with flashbacks to finding her friends' corpses as well as decapitating the maniacal Mrs. Voorhees. Not long after waking from one of these nightmares, Alice goes for a peek in the fridge and instead of catnip, finds Mrs. Voorhees' severed head inside. She's then grabbed from behind and has an ice pick shoved through her face. Similar to Scream's famous opening sequence, Alice's swift and brutal murder was a grim reminder to the audience that anything could happen. Even more so if you watch the uncut version, where the pick goes straight through her nose. Number 6. Not Getting Into the Spirit, Trick or Treat. A throwback to the old-fashioned horror films of yesteryear, Trick or Treat is a much-loved cult classic that has been a staple of Halloween viewing for horror fans since it came out. And whilst its collection of twisted short stories is full of all manner of tricks, treats, and nastiness, its most brutal and shocking moment is arguably in its opening scene. As couple Emma and Henry get back home, Emma sets about taking down all the decorations, which are quite frankly ridiculous, by the way. I mean, who has time to put that much effort into Halloween? While out though, she's viciously attacked and killed by someone under a sheet. Having somehow slept through all of this, Henry goes to check on her a little while later, finding only her body and her mutilated head as the new jack-o'-lantern decoration. It's a brilliantly chilling opening that sets the stage for the rest of the Halloween-themed shenanigans that are to follow, and one that will definitely linger in your mind for quite some time. Number 5. Nightmare Hospital Halloween 2. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 tends to get a lot of flack from fans of the genre. For many, it's either too sloppily made, too out there, or too nihilistically brutal for its own good. To some, however, that last facet is actually one of its biggest strengths. Following on directly from the previous movie, a battered and bloodied Laurie Strode roams the streets in a traumatized haze, before being picked up by the police and undergoing an incredibly icky surgery. While all of this happens, good old Michael Myers is once again free and on the prowl. This is already a pretty rough opening regardless, but the fun doesn't stop there, as once Laurie comes to after her surgery, she once again comes face to face with Michael, who in one of the most excessively violent stabbings ever put to film, murders a nurse right in front of her. Running through the hospital, she then finds numerous scenes of carnage, including an entire pit full of corpses. The fact that the entire sequence is revealed to be a nightmare is a tad frustrating, but given how wild and gruesome the whole thing gets, it can be slightly forgiven. Number 4. That shouldn't bend that way. It follows. Considering its very ominous and deliberately vague title, many went into It Follows with very little clue as to what it was actually about, and its now infamous opening certainly didn't help the confusion. See, the movie opens on a quiet suburban street with the sun setting and fall leaves being scattered across the road. This calm is suddenly broken though when Annie bursts out of her front door, running as if something is chasing her. Both her dad and her neighbors ask if she's alright, which she insists that she is, but then she promptly sprints back into her house and back out again before jumping into a car and driving away. She then sits tearfully on a beach, surrounded by the encroaching darkness of the night, and answers a phone call from her dad, in which she tells him how much she loves him, apologizes, and then hangs up, resigned to her fate. The next we see of Annie, she's dead on the beach, her eyes glazed over, and her right leg snapped in a way that absolutely does not look comfortable. It's a terrifically suspenseful and grotesque scene that perfectly sets the tone for the rest of the film. Number 3. Open Heart Surgery, Suspiria, 1977. Fans of Dario Argento likely went into this film expecting his usual trademark stylish violence, but no one could have possibly been prepared for the ridiculously violent double murder that awaited them within the film's first 15 minutes. Arriving at the Tanz Dance Academy on a dark and stormy night, our protagonist Susie spots a young woman named Pat fleeing from the school in a state of panic. After this, Pat legs it to a friend's house, clearly spooked by something. Seemingly now safe in her mate's gaff, Pat is then suddenly attacked and has her face smashed through the bathroom window. The punishment continues as she's pulled out to the roof and stabbed so many times that you can actually see her heart, which the killer then pierces. As the final act of overkill, she's thrown through the glass ceiling and hanged while the shards impale her friend trying to help below. It truly is one of those sequences that must be seen to be believed, and even after all these years, it's still truly breathtaking. Number 2. Why isn't Terry answering? Midsommar. After the runaway success of Hereditary, the horror community's eyes were firmly placed on Ari Aster, and he did not disappoint with his follow-up film Midsommar. Courtesy of the film's marketing, audiences went into the movie expecting a straight-up folk horror nightmare, which for the most part it admittedly kinda is. However, audiences were definitely not expecting to see one of the most upsetting and genuinely disturbing opening acts the genre has seen for quite some time. When Florence Pugh's Danny hasn't heard from her unstable sister Terry for a couple of days, she fears the worst. However, nothing could prepare her for the reveal that Terry has not only taken her own life, but that of their parents too, by filling their home with carbon monoxide. In some truly bone-chilling shots, we see Terry dead, having duct-taped a tube directly from the car to her own face. It's a harrowing image, and one that will stay with you for the rest of the runtime. Number 1. Breakfast with a Side of Homicide, Martyrs, 2008. If you're ever in the mood to just completely ruin your day, then Martyrs is always on hand. Easily the most extreme of the new wave of French extremity movement that was prevalent in the early 2000s, this film immediately pummels you with brutality and then never loosens its grip. After a brief prologue in which a captive young girl escapes from a rundown industrial estate only to be haunted by the presence of an emaciated woman, we then jump ahead in time to the Belfin family sitting around the breakfast table, seeing the morning in the most idyllic way possible. A sudden knock at the door interrupts them though, and upon answering, the father has a hole punched through his chest by a hooded female assailant with a shotgun, who then proceeds to mercilessly gun down the mother and 2 children. It's stark, brutal, and immediately fills the audience with intrigue. And in the grand scheme of Martyrs, this is just the tip of the gory iceberg. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think of these brutal openings, and are there any cool ones I missed here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.